Hey, it's Jason Hartman. Thank you for joining me for an amazing lesson on selling your properties to investors. Now, if you're in the commercial real estate game, you're dealing in a market where pretty much everybody buying the property, and I say pretty much because nothing is 100% in the world, but pretty much everybody in the market is going to be an investor buying your property. Then it goes without saying what the sort of obvious characteristics that influence investors are. But when we're in that market that sort of borders on the fringe where a homeowner could buy the property, if you're talking about a single family home or, maybe even a condo or townhome, although I'm not that crazy about those. I love those single family homes the most. But if you're in that market, your buyer could be an investor or they could be a homeowner. And so instead of talking about pride of ownership in this lesson, we're going to talk about pride of cash flow. So our learning objectives here are pretty simple. We just want to learn the profile of investor buyers. We want to learn what they value most and what they're least interested in, so we don't waste time, money, and resources spending them and squandering them on things that really aren't going to pay us back and maximize our investment returns. So the profiles of investor buyers, well, they're looking for superior performance. Obviously, investors are all about performance. Now, don't get me wrong. Investors do have thoughts and emotions and egos, just like we all do. That's part of human nature. So I'm telling you what they maybe should be looking for the most. They are influenced by some of the other things as well, but the primary concern is what we're focusing on here in this lesson. So they're principally concerned with capturing the most cash flow and the most appreciation for a given investment. They're looking for superior rents because rents in all investments are usually the bulk of our cash flow. Now, there are other sources of income sometimes that we've talked about on many previous lessons, but again, the rents really drive the equation in almost all cases. They're looking to purchase a property at a low price and sell at a higher price in the future. It's the old buy low and sell high, obviously. Investors will pay for cash flow. They generally won't pay too much, although they may pay a little bit, for curb appeal and some of those sort of soft factors, as we'll call them. The customizations that really drive owner-occupant buyers to be emotionally attached to a property, they won't be of much concern to investors unless they produce income, because investors are all about income. Okay, so what do these investor buyers value most? Well, they definitely value superior rents, superior income, superior revenues. They value stability. Now, there's a common phrase in the commercial real estate category, and it's called stabilized. And there are many people out there, in fact, this is especially prevalent in the apartment world, in the multifamily investing world, that go and they find properties that are in trouble, that usually are apartment complexes, although they could be an office building or a retail center or whatever. But it's very common in the apartment world, where they'll look for a property that's in trouble, that is being sold at a bargain price, and they will go in and, through a lot of effort and a lot of marketing, a lot of fix-up, they will go in and do what's called stabilizing that property, where they'll reduce the vacancies, they'll get tenants to renew their leases, maybe they'll fix the property up, usually that's part of it. They'll put a sign out on the building possibly that says, "Under new management." So the world knows that all of the bad things the prior manager did, all of the problems they had before, that's not the same deal. They will try and stabilize the property. And if they can stabilize that property, it will be very appealing to other investors, and they can turn around and sell that property for a much higher price. And they can sell it where they will get a better cap rate on that investment because it is stable and it's more simple for a new investor to come in and manage that property. Well, certainly low acquisition cost. I mean, everybody wants a great deal, right? So a low cost in comparison to the revenue from rents and the stability, these three factors are a big part of the equation. And then a stable property that requires minimal repairs. So if there's a lot of improvement and fix-up cost where the investor is having to do those things, make a lot of effort, deal with contractors, deal with fix-up people, but not only that, they have to spend a bunch of money and they're really unsure of the return they will get from that expense. For example, if we put a tot lot in this apartment complex, or if we put a little putting green or a gym for the tenants, and I'm talking about apartments again because this is a very common concept of stabilizing the property in apartments, then they definitely can increase returns. But remember, that's always a question mark in the investor's mind. If they have to do a lot of improvements and repairs to the property, they don't for sure know what they're going to get out of that in terms of return on their investment there. So again, they're concerned with cash flows and they're concerned with simplicity and stability. Those are things investors want. So what do they value least? They don't really care much about the soft improvements. You know, if the property has granite countertops, great. It's better than one that doesn't. If it has all kinds of cool upgrades and swanky features, it's better than one that doesn't have that. But again, they're not likely to pay you much, if anything, for those improvements. And stability. They don't want properties with a lot of turnover. If you've had past tenants in your property that aren't sticking around and they're not staying and they're leaving and there's a lot of turnover and what's called make-ready cost in between those tenant turns, that can become very expensive. So investors value stability. They generally, although many investors, they kind of make this mistake, they generally don't like high land values. And remember I told you before about the Hartman Risk Evaluator, and we talked in the past about cyclical, linear, and hybrid markets in different places around the world and of course around the United States. Well, the cyclical markets tend to be the high land value markets, as we learned. And those markets generally do not produce good cash flow, and they have a much higher risk and a lower cap rate and a lower return on investment attached to them. So investors generally don't like high land value markets. And they might be calling themselves investors, but they're really more on the speculative part of that spectrum than the investor part of it. And they don't like fixer-upper properties requiring major repairs because, again, and I'm not talking about the flipper here. I'm talking about the buy and hold investor, because that's always a question mark in their mind as to what those repair costs will yield, and they usually don't want to hassle with it. They're not likely to pay extra for high-end finishes and soft improvements, and they definitely seek to avoid high tenant turnover situations, and they like stability. So this is a pretty simple lesson. A lot of these things might seem rather obvious to most people, maybe not all of them, but several of them. So just write out a simple strategy for marketing your property to investor buyers. Just a quick paragraph or two, no big deal. We've got a template here to help you with that. Just upload a screenshot of the strategy document and you'll have your badge, and I look forward to talking to you on the next lesson.